Hello viewers, in today's class we are going to discuss three trigonometric limits, right? And here we have to find the values of these three limits, and here the important thing is that we'll not use the general method or the complete method to solve these three limits, right? Rather we'll solve these three limits by the application of a direct formula. So here first of all we'll see the general form of the limit corresponding to these three problems, right? And we'll also discuss the corresponding formula, how to calculate these three limits, right? So let us discuss these three limits one by one. So now in the first problem we have this limit, that is limit x tends to a, cos 6x minus cos 5x divided by cos 3x minus cos 9x, right? So in order to calculate the limits of this form, we have this general form, right? So we have limit x tends to 0, and we have the limit that is cos ax minus cos bx divided by cosine of say px minus cosine of qx, right? So this is the general form of this type of limit, right? So now if we compare these two forms, we see that the value of a is 6, then the value of b is 5, and then the value of p is 3, and the value of q is 9, right? So now here we are not going to use the formulas like cos of c minus cos of d, which is minus 2 sine c plus d over 2 times sine c minus d over 2, right? So here we are not going to use these results from trigonometry to solve these type of limits, right? So whenever we come across with this type of limit, then the direct result to calculate this type of limit is to find a square minus b square, that is this is a, this is b, so we'll find a square minus b square divided by p square minus q square, right? So the limit of this function is equal to a square minus b square over p square minus q square, right? So now if we apply this formula to this limit, then we can now write 6 square minus 5 square, because a is 6, b is 5, and then divided by p square minus q square. So p is 3 and q is 9, right? So here we have now the value of this limit as 6 square minus 5 square divided by 3 square minus 9 square. Now we can simplify it. So here we can apply a square minus b square formula. So we have 6 minus 5, this is 6 plus 5, and here we have 3 minus 9, here we have 3 plus 9, right? So this is 1 times 11 divided by minus 6 times 12, so this is minus 11 over 72, right? So the value of this limit due to this result is equal to minus 11 over 72, right? So we can quickly find out the limits of these type of functions which have this form, that is cos ax minus cos bx divided by cos px minus cos qx when x tends to 0 is equal to a square minus b square over p square minus q square, right? So now let us take the second problem. So now in the second problem we have limit x tends to 0 cos 4x minus cos 7x divided by x square, right? So here again will not use this result to evaluate this limit, right? So we'll use the direct method. So for direct method we have this form, that is the limit x tends to 0, and we have cos of say mx minus cos of nx divided by x square, right? So if we have this general form, then the value of this limit is given by n square minus m square over 2, right? So when we have cos mx minus cos nx divided by x square, then first we'll write this n, right? So n square minus m square divided by 2, right? So now if we compare this form with this one, then we see that the value of m is 4, the value of n is 7, right? So now if we apply this rule to this function, then we have n square minus m square. So we have 7 square minus 4 square divided by 2, right? So again applying a square minus b square, so we have 7 minus 4, 7 plus 4 divided by 2. So this is 3 times 11 over 2, that is 33 over 2, right? So the value of this limit as per this result is equal to 33 over 2, right? So we can quickly find out the limit of these type of functions by using this rule, right? So now let us take the third problem. Now in the third problem we have limit x tends to 0, 1 minus cos 8x divided by 1 minus cos 6x, right? So here again we'll not follow the usual method to calculate the limit, but we'll use this direct result. See, if we have limit x tends to 0, 1 minus cos of px divided by 1 minus cos of qx, right? So if we have a limit of this form, then we can directly write the value of this type of limit as p square divided by q square, where p is the coefficient of x here and q is the coefficient of x here, right? So here if we compare this form with this one, then we see that the value of p is 8, the value of q is 6, right? So we can now directly write p square over q square. So we have 8 square divided by 6 square, that is 64 over 36. Now we can simplify it. So we have 4 16s are 64 and 4 and 9s are, right? So the value of this limit is equal to 16 over 9, right? So in this lecture we have discussed how quickly by making use of these three types of direct result to evaluate limits of these kinds.